Welcome to our presentation about organizational culture. This week we will do the topic extension. We're Group 7, Team E. My name is Simon for those of you who do not know. We'll first start off by giving an overview of the lecture theory. We'll then introduce the competing values framework, the organizational culture assessment instrument, and we will further apply this to a case of a university. We will then in the end give you a conclusion. So, why is culture important? As we're in the field of international business, cultural differences are omnipresent. We always deal with them when we go abroad, when we want to do business in a certain setting or in a different location. So, it's one of the main issues in this field, and there is no way to avoid this topic. So, as nowadays companies which are successful and which are well known are usually global rather than local companies, is a very important topic for us. As organizational culture determines effectiveness in those cases of going abroad and doing business, we decided to do our topic extension in this field, as we think it is very helpful to broaden our horizon in this specific topic. So, what does the theory from the lecture say? As mentioned before, we have rather global corporations which of course interact with various cultures when they do business abroad. And not only in this area culture matters, as we all know we come from different cultures, and in a business setting as well as in a social and private setting, culture always matters, and it always makes a difference how well we understand it and how well we interact with each other. If we look at academic research, we will find that there's very ambiguous definitions of culture. Even it's very hard to say what an exact definition of culture could be. There's three layers which most scholars agree upon, which we can label as the first layer, which is behavior, the second one as the values, beliefs, and preferences of a culture, and the last one are the basic assumptions and meanings which are present in the culture. So there are four types of culture in the managerial field, which we will also discuss today a bit more. Not those exact points, but we will focus on the managerial or in general the business field or organizational culture. So we first of all have the corporate culture, which stems from the history of the company and is represented in the norms, beliefs, and behaviors which are present within a company. We then have a second layer, which is defined as the industry culture, which is how players within a certain industry behave and what the certain spoken and unspoken rules within this industry are. We then have the professional culture, which comes from the way people execute their profession and how they do their jobs, and the certain norms which come from maybe the training they received or the way they have to do their business. And of course, we have the national or ethnic culture, which is well present in all cases for us and for people in all countries. So this week we focus our topic extension on the competing values framework and the organizational culture assessment instrument. We will hear more about that in a second. We will explore the research question, how can organizational culture be explained using the competing values framework and the organizational culture assessment instrument framework, and how can this be applied in universities. We will now continue with the next part about the competing values framework.
Hi, my name is Stella, and I will be presenting the Competing Values Framework, also known as CVF. It first emerged through the research of Quinn and Rohrbaugh in 1981, who identified the main criteria for organizational effectiveness, and it's now one of the most commonly used frameworks when concerning organizational culture. This evolved into the framework you can see here on the slides, and Hester will go more into depth about the categories that you can see in each quadrant. As you can see, there are two dimensions, the internal-external dimension on the sides and the control-flexibility dimensions on the top and bottom. These show what people value in their company in an organizational context. The internal-external dimension distinguishes between effectiveness criteria that emphasizes flexibility, discretion, and dynamism from criteria that highlight stability, order, and control. This means that some organizations are most effective when they are constantly changing their product mix and organizational forms, such as Nike or Microsoft, whilst other organizations are more effective when they are perceived as stable and predictable, such as most government agencies. The control flexibility dimension differentiates between organizations that have more of an internal orientation and integration and organizations that are more externally oriented. And internal positioning focuses inward on stuff such as development, integration, or coordination, such as the company IBM or HP, whilst an external positioning concentrates on looking at the market and the competitors as well as the customers, such as Toyota. Of course, both of these dimensions are always needed to fully succeed, but organizations tend to have a preference in what they will dominate in, so flexibility, stability, internal or external. This creates the four quadrants that are all unique and differentiate from each other. So the upper left one identifies values that emphasize an internal flexible focus, whereas the upper right one identifies values that emphasize more of an external flexible focus. And the bottom left quadrant emphasizes an internal controlled focus, and the bottom right quadrant identifies values that emphasize an external controlled focus. And since all of these quadrants compete with each other, the framework is called the competing values framework, as a company generally cannot be categorized into more than one quadrant. This framework was expanded by Professors Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron to form the OCAI framework, which builds upon the CVF. And now Hester will go more in depth into that.
Hi everyone, my name is Hester, and as Stella just mentioned, I will go more into depth on those quadrants that you've seen before, and these four together consist of the OCAI. So what is the OCAI? The OCAI is the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument. And whereas CVS can be seen as more of a theoretical framework, the OCAI is the empirical extension of it. It resulted into a survey that can easily be used by members of an organizational culture. And it uses four major culture types. I will go more into these on the next slides. So their aim is to predict the performance of the organization, to identify the existing culture, and to identify the desired future culture. So as you can see here in this model, you can see that members of this organizational culture, they deemed their culture as more of a hierarchy and less of an adhocracy. However, they aim, this you can see in the pink, what is the existing culture. In the blue, you see what is their desired culture. So they desire to have less of an hierarchy and more of an adhocracy. So you can see the difference between what they currently have and what they aim to have based on their future goals or future plans. So now we'll go more into depth on these four cultures. So first of all, we have the hierarchy culture. And the hierarchy culture has also been named the control culture. It's very process-oriented, and their emphasis is on formal rules and policies. Thus, it's very formalized and standardized. And their long-term concerns are with stability, predictability, and efficiency. They try to run their tasks and execute them as smooth as possible. And they determine success by having continuous planning and low costs. So examples of this can be found in government agencies, military, and banking. So when looking at the matrix, you can see that the hierarchy has an internal focus and integration. It looks at their processes and how they can continuously develop them and make them the most efficient they can. They also look at stability and control. They aim to be predictable, and they aim to have continuous planning so that employees know what is expected of them. So now we'll go more into the next one. So second of all, we have the market culture, and the market culture has also been named the compete culture. It's very results oriented, and they look at reaching targets and deadlines, and leaders can be described as tough, as being demanding, and having high expectations of their employees. So they emphasize market leadership, reputation, and success. This can be seen in their long-term goals as they are concerned, their long-term concerns, as they are concerned with competition and achieving targets. They want to be the number one in the market, and therefore they look at what their competition is doing and try to outcompete them. They try to be successful in terms of reaching their targets and goals. So success is determined by market share and market penetration. They aim to be as profitable as they can and to advance in as many markets as possible. So examples can be found in consultancy, accounting, and sales firms. When looking at the matrix, we see that the market culture has an external focus and differentiation. This is because they look at the external environment. They look at how competitors are doing and if they're better than them, if they're worse than them, and they compare themselves to them. However, they also look at stability and control. They aim to have a stable market share. They aim to have success determined by control, and this control is also seen in their high emphasis on achieving targets and goals. Okay, so third of all, we have the clan culture. And the clan culture can also be described as a collaborative culture. They're very people-oriented, there's a friendly workspace, and it can even be seen as an extended family. So here, leaders are seen more as mentors or even as parent figures. And they emphasize on individual development and cohesion between employees and employee morale. So their long-term concerns are with loyalty and tradition. And they determine success by looking at internal climate and concern for people. They try to aim for a long-term benefit of individual development. So therefore, human resource management is also very important here, and as they aim to create the best environment possible for their employees. Therefore, there's also high commitment and there's a lot of teamwork. Examples of this can be found in healthcare and education. So when looking at the matrix, we see that clan culture has an internal focus and integration. And this makes sense as they look at the culture, they look at their organizational culture by looking at their employees. If their employees are satisfied or if they aim to have differences in procedures. So they're also very flexible, and they look at flexibility and discretion. So if there is an issue, how can we adapt to that quickly to care for the needs of our employees? And then lastly, we have the adhocracy culture. And this culture is also named the create culture, and it's very dynamic and it's entrepreneurial. They emphasize on advancing knowledge, products, services with a continuous view on innovation. So their long-term concerns are with rapid growth and with acquiring new resources. And here leaders urge their employees to innovate, they urge them to experiment and to fail. And they're very eager to change and to take up new challenges. And success is determined by producing unique products and services. And examples of this can be found in technical startups or in disruptive industries such as Airbnb or Uber. So in the matrix, you can see that adhocracy has an external focus and differentiation. They look at how they can acquire new resources and what kind of technologies have already been used and how they can alter and adapt that. And they look at flexibility and discretion. They try to be as flexible as possible by constantly adapting to the external environment that they're in. So now that we have seen the 4 cultures, we are going to apply them.
Thank you, Hester. My name is Amy, and I'm going to walk you through the process of applying this tool to an organization. As you might have already figured, the application of the organizational culture assessment instrument is very easy to understand. For time's sake, and because Hester has already described the 4 organizational types and the companies or organizations that typically have them in detail, we are only going to go through the application. There are 6 items with 4 possibilities each, and all you have to do is think about which of these alternatives fits your company best at the current moment, and which one do you want to fit to your company in the future. The 6 items are dominant characteristics, organizational leadership, management of employees, organization blue, strategic emphasis, and criteria of success. I'm going to explain how it works on the first item, namely the dominant characteristics. If you have a look at the 4 options on the right side of the slide, feel free to pause the video here for a second. You will immediately recognize the different options as types of organization culture as previously described by Hester. A is very personal, like the clan culture. B is dynamic, like the adhocracy, C is the market culture, while D is structured, like the hierarchy culture. All you have to do is describe which statement fits best to your company at the moment and which one you want to fit to your company in the future. If you feel like your organization is very structured, but you want it to feel more comfortable and open, you would select D for now and A for preferred. After having decided this for all 6 items, you take the average of all A's and all B's and C's and D's. You take the average by summing the frequency of the letters and then dividing them by 6. This way you have values to imputate into your graph, and you will know where to implement possible organizational cultural changes. Now moving on to the conclusion.
All right, so in conclusion, we can first deal with the theory of the lecture. So from what we understand is that there's a link between global cooperation and culture. Also, we understand as well that cultures matters depending on the location, and that there are 4 types of cultures which correspond to corporate culture, industry culture, professional culture, and national culture. Also, about the competing values framework, we can understand that this framework has been developed by Quinn and Rohrbach in 1981, and it's composed of 2 dimensions, internal and external dimension, and the stability and flexibility dimension. Also, we can have a look on another framework, which is the OCAI, Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument, and it's composed of 4 types of cultures, which are hierarchy, that is more of a control culture, market cultures or compete culture, clan culture or collaborate culture, and adhocracy culture, or also create culture. Now, the aim of this framework is mostly to predict organizational performance, to identify the existing cultures in that same corporate, and to identify the desired future culture in the company. And the application could be actually very simple, very simple in a company by using a template of 6 items with an average of 4 alternatives, as we saw earlier. Thank you for listening, and feel free to comment below if you have any questions or any insight that could be useful. Thank you.